Welcome everyone to Choice Conversations, the podcast dedicated to helping you improve your life, one choice at a time. I'm your host, Chris Stefanik. Let's do this. Hey gang, today I've got for you an interview I recorded with life coach Jeanne Litt. She shares with us her touching story of how she went through divorce, lost her children, and then bounced back from that, and then quadrupled her income and found the love of her life. It's really a great story, and it was really great of Jeanne to be so open and vulnerable for us. She from there went on to talk about the strategies she's used to turn her life around and the strategies that she uses to help her clients do the same. We talk about a growth mindset, abundance versus scarcity, the importance of listening and empathy, looking at all or nothing versus small gains, going for your heart's desire, all of this and much more. Lots of wisdom in this episode. As usual, if you would like to help the show out, one of the best ways to do that is go to patreon.com/choiceconversations and sign up. And there you can receive lots of great bonus content and help out the show. All right, here's the interview with Jeanne. Hi, Jeanne. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Very well, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, well, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Hello, everyone out there. My name is Jeanne Litt. I'm a 70-year-old woman who's embarking on a career as a life coach, a soul-centered life coach. What that means is, in addition to assisting clients to move forward on the goal line with real-world goals, my aim is to also assist them to elevate their consciousness along the learning line or the soul line. And the way people do that is as obstacles come up, to learn what are the lessons there for them. And once you learn a lesson, an obstacle becomes more of a stepping stone to a more elevated and satisfying life. And totally loving this career. I believe that the best gift we can give our children is a life well lived, and the example of that. And that's my plan.
Right. All right, so now, what led you to making this career change and looking at being a life coach? And I should just mention that I really admire your courage and your and these actions that you've taken to go on a career change and when in your 70s. You know, I was telling you that off the air, that I think that's just wonderful, that a lot of people when they're my age in their 40s are like, oh, I could never change careers because it's just too far along or whatever. And I'm like, which I don't agree with personally, but so, at any rate, what led you to that?
It's funny you say that because I was that way in my 40s, in my 50s, in my 60s. I guess it's an example of the blessing in the challenges. I found myself writing one time, every cloud has a silver lining and sometimes it's gold. A golden cloud lining that I found was I was a teenager. My grandmother was diagnosed with senility. She was 70 years old, and she was kind of a mean senile. She had become very bitter about life. And I remember telling my mother that if my mother went that way, I would shoot her. Ooh, the sweet child that I was. Anyway, when my mother turned 70, she was diagnosed with atypical senility. And I was like, uh-oh. So I made sure I completed my bucket list and did the things I really wanted to do. And now I'm 70 and I'm not senile. And I feel so blessed. My father lived into his 90s and with all his faculties. And he challenged me to live longer than he did. And that's my plan. So I consider myself middle-aged is what I like to think of now. I think with the way the world is now, I have a good shot at going over 100. And I have it's perfect opportunity for a whole new chapter in my life. And I'm in a position where I don't have to worry about providing for my children or all those kinds of things that make it harder to make a career change when you're younger.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're right in that it's so exciting in that like there's more people like that are 100 years old alive now than what they estimate than, there ever was in like the existence of the history of the human race. You add up all the people that lived to 100 previously, and it was less than the number of people that are 100 years old that are alive right now at this moment. And, I think it's, just a matter of time before, like 90 is going to be the new 60 kind of thing. And you can, there's no reason not to just plan on living to 100. And if you had 30 years left in your life, you look back on the human race, I mean, at a minimum, that's middle age, right? If you say in the past, you had 30 years left, that's middle age, or if not even younger than that, it was not that long ago where, life expectancy was really short. So it's wonderful times we live in. Now, your father challenged you to live longer than he did, and he lived into his 90s. So you're like, okay, I've got a lot of, it's not time to retire. I need to, this is just, my life still has a lot left to it. Why choose the path of coaching?
Of life coaching? Well, probably one of the most significant moments, defining moment in my life was when my daughter, I have 3 children. When my daughter was 10 years old, her father left us. That was my 2 teenage sons, young teens, and my daughter, 10 years old. And he came back a year later when she was 11 on Father's Day, and he wanted to take her out for the day. I told her that I was very happy for her, and I sincerely was, that because she had been missing him so much. They went out for the day, and she came back in the evening and said that her father had instructed her to tell me that she was going to live with him now. I went ballistic. I wanted to scream, have a major hissy fit. I wanted to run down the driveway and chase after his car, screaming at him. And then I saw my daughter's face, and I remembered once my husband left, he took his salary with him, so I needed to increase my income. I was doing everything I could think of. And one of the things was each day I would go into a sanctuary I created in my inner creative imagination and see myself experiencing abundance that day. And on this particular day, what I had seen was myself holding my daughter and singing to her, which didn't seem that unusual at the time, but in this moment I realized when she left with him, that would be my last opportunity that day to take her in my arms and sing to her, so I did. And I think we spent the whole hour with me singing to her. I don't think we even thought about packing. And anyway, she went off with her father, and I didn't realize that was the last time we would live together. And I saw her not nearly enough in the next decade. Not nearly enough for my child. Anyway, I'm eternally grateful that my inner wisdom, I believe the wisdom of our heart is much greater than our the intelligence of our mind. I'm forever grateful that my wisdom guided me to spend our last moments in loving instead of me having a temper tantrum. And after she went to live with her father, that further drove me to seek some peace for myself and resolution. So I went to the University of Santa Monica and took at that time their course was called Applied Psychology. Now it's called Spiritual Psychology. But it set me on a course of the life coaching things that I like to work with my clients. That is taking obstacles and learning from them and using them to help me grow.
Yeah, wow, that was a really touching story. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
It's really tough. So I'm sorry you had to go through that. It's interesting. It kind of gives an example of the obstacles as stepping stones that you had talked about. Now, I'm curious, when you said, you look at obstacles as stepping stones, or as like learning opportunities might be another way to say that.
Yes.
And there are some people, some life coaches, some people that are in the self-help space, authors and the like, who will say things like, the things that happen to you happen for a reason, and it's the universe's way of making you stronger and stuff like that. And to be honest, I always kind of bristle at that. There are some horrible, horrendous things happen to people, people that's suffering brutal rapes or, having family members, murdered, or, there's all these terrible things that can happen. It's like, oh, that was actually a good thing, is what they'll say. This is the universe's way of making you stronger and all that stuff. And it's one of those things where I don't buy that. I'm like, it's a horrible thing, and it would have been better. You would have been better off if it hadn't happened, right? Now, that isn't to say that you can't try to make lemonade out of lemons. You can say, okay, what can I learn from this going forward? How can I use this as a stepping stone, to use your words? But it doesn't mean it wasn't a terrible thing, and that it didn't suck, and that somehow this was just meant to happen. You know what I mean? So I guess that's my take on it. When I always kind of like, there's always, whenever I hear somebody say something like that, and there's a number of people that do it, and I'm always like, well, sure. We want to learn from our mistakes. We want to learn from when bad things happen and see, and certainly want to get back up when life knocks us down. I understand that completely, but I find umbrage, I guess, with like, when people are like, oh, well, it was just, everything that happened to you was meant to be. It was part of the design so that you could be who you are. And I always just kind of put an asterisk. I'm like, okay, I'll just put an asterisk next to that. And, I don't know. Does that make sense? And what are your thoughts on what I was saying there?
I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I do think sometimes it's like, say a person just lost a child, they're not, to even say that at that time to them seems like so insensitive. Mm-hmm. For myself, I know that, if somebody said that to me, I was just so busy being angry.
Yeah, well, and, it's funny. That's like one of the things, like, people will say when the child is lost. People will say to the parents, "Oh, well, God just gained another angel." These kind of things, and it's like, it's unbelievable to me some of the things people will say. And I know I don't blame the people. Our society doesn't really teach people healthy ways to comfort others whenever they've lost someone, when they're grieving, or how to, just as yourself, how to grieve in a healthy manner. That's something that's really lacking in our society. So, people are, in general, people are doing the best they can with what they've got, but it's crazy how, like, that's you'll hear that stuff, whenever somebody's just suffered just a horrible, horrible loss.
Yes. And I've been completely guilty of the state of not knowing what to say to someone at those times. I think the key is that to assist the person to come to find the silver lining themselves. I remember one time hearing Ron Hulnick from the University of Santa Monica saying, if your loved one dies, how can you say there's something good here? I mean, everybody is so sad. And he pointed out that there's always something good you can find. And in that case, one thing that he saw was that the loving was so present for all the family members who were bereaved. And I think of that every time I experience the death of someone loved by me or by others, that it does totally bring you into a loving. Families forget their differences. They put aside their grudges with each other for the moment and come back into the loving. And I do believe there is a silver golden lining. It just seems like the best part of it is when the person who's having the challenge comes to that themselves. And coming to that can take strange paths. I remember being so angry at God, and in my classes I had an opportunity to gestalt God, and I told him off in no uncertain terms, and really, I don't have my children with me? Because my sons went to live with their father a year or so after that. And I was so angry and hurt, and the part of the golden lining that I found out of all that was the realization that I had, for myself, I made my children more important than God. And by not having them with me, I had an opportunity to put God back in my life. And I'm not saying anybody has to be a believer in God. It's just that for me, I had considered myself agnostic, and my children were the most important thing to me. And for me to return it to an order where God is the most important thing it brings me so much more peace.
I see. I'm curious what your style is as a life coach. So, the coaches can vary dramatically from one to the next. And so how would you describe your style?
I love these questions you ask.
Oh.
I wondered that myself, and part of this class is learning what our particular style is. Well, I guess more what we have to offer. And I've always wondered what I have to offer the world. And I believe what I have to offer is creating abundance. That with my daughter, when I chose to sing to her, I created the abundance of peace and knowing that I was in the loving instead of the temper tantruming. With a lot of my style, I mean, I believe completely that every human being has all the resources necessary to handle their lives. That doesn't mean they don't need to ask for help from others, but I believe all the answers come from the person. So my style is to listen to the person and then draw the answers for them out of them. We've been doing this thing called generative questioning, where as you listen, the questions, I believe they come by intuition, divine inspiration, if you would, to ask the person. And I've been daring to risk whenever an intuitive hit comes to me to just bring it up, where before I would probably judge it and not say it and think, well, judge it that maybe it wasn't appropriate or whatever. Now I just risk saying it in the most loving way I can. And even though sometimes I might get an intuitive hit, like say to someone, well, what comes to my mind is, are you feeling anger about that? And they might be like, no, not anger. I'm really, really sad and hurt. And even though my intuitive hit might not be what the truth is for them, it helps both of us to get to where the truth is. And that's the important part. Because definitely I don't have the answers, and I can't guarantee any kind of success, but I am willing to listen and do my best to serve each person in their own realizations.
Right, right. So it sounds like your style would be one where you provide someone for them to a person for them to that will listen to them and provide empathy to them, and then ask questions that allow them to seek their own answers. Does that sound about right?
Yes, exactly. And actually, it's pretty sweet job for me. I don't have to know anything.
Right, right. Yeah, that's wonderful. I like that methodology. And when I'm talking with friends and family and you know, they're telling me about how they're having a rough day or whatever it is, you know, I actually kind of use that methodology myself. You know, in the past, before my awakening, when other people were talking, I was always just thinking about what was I going to say next, you know, rather than like listening and being present for them and really, really trying to understand where they were coming from and give them empathy, you know. And it's a lot more rewarding for me. That's what I've found, is it's a lot more rewarding for me, let alone it's giving the person that I'm talking with a lot more, you know, it's because everybody needs empathy. But for me, it's just if I'm just thinking about what it is that I want to say next, it's like, you know, I already know what it is that I know. So I'm not learning anything if I'm just like, I'm not really taking in what they're saying, and I'm just, you know, there's a whole bunch coming out and not a lot going in. You know what I mean? How do I come out of that exchange any different than I was before I went into it? But if I really listen and, you know, open my heart and try to feel what the other person's feeling and put myself in their shoes, you know, I can come out of it learning a lot. So that's one of the things I really like about that approach.
It's beautiful. What you say is how I used to be too self-conscious to help people. And Steve Chandler, he's a life coach, and his take on it, I believe it came from him, is if we have a telescope and we have it pointed looking at ourselves, wondering what we're going to say or how we're doing, kind of thing, that's the wrong approach. But if we turn the telescope toward the person we're listening to and study everything about them as carefully as we can, then there isn't any place for self-consciousness, or, like you say, you get to learn so much more than just telling what we already know.
Right, right. And so, whenever you realize that turning point, right, that listening to others and asking these questions, how valuable that was, how did you feel at that time?
It feels so completely fulfilling to feel like I can be of service to someone else. And I've received that from so many people. I believe my affirmation abundance, my abundance affirmation is I'm taking time for myself to love and be loved. And that does it for me. That kind of listening, serving.
Right, right. Now, you've mentioned abundance a couple times. I guess, what does abundance mean to you? Because, I mean, I did a book review on a book called Abundance. So
yes, I saw that. I listened to that.
But what does it mean to you?
To me, it means, in the song, from the Fiddler on the Roof, when he sings, "If I Were a Rich Man," Tavia sings that. He sings about if God would just give him wealth, he'd have the biggest house in town and ducks and chickens and geese and everything. And he talks about all the things he'd have with all his wealth. And then he comes to a part where he says, and I have it here somewhere, but he says he spends several hours a day discussing the holy books, and that would be the sweetest thing of all. And my take on abundance is to go for the sweetest thing of all, whatever that is. And then it's as if we already have all those riches and we don't have to have them and spend all the time going through all the material things to finally get to whatever is the sweetest thing of all for us. So I love the thought of going for your heart's desire and going in, like Tagiev said, he would want to spend several hours a day discussing the holy books. If a person took even 5 minutes, 3 minutes, discussing the holy books, if that was the sweetest thing of all for you, I believe it couldn't help but change your life in terms of your happiness level. And I think a lot of us have learned, I know I learned, I misunderstood that going for my heart's desire was a bad thing. When I was 7, I lived in an area that was predominantly Catholic, and my parents and family were Catholic. It was our whole life, our church, our social life, everything. And there were some Protestant families. And then at one time, when I was 7 years old, a Jewish family moved into town. And I came home one day so happy, and I shared with my mother my heart's desire. And I said, Mommy, I want to marry the Jewish boy. And my mother got upset because to her, the best way for me to have happiness was to marry within my religion. But I didn't understand why she was so upset. I just got the message very strongly that going after my heart's desire upset my mother, so it must be a bad thing. And what I wanted must not be good, so it's better not to go for what you want. And I think a lot of us end up with those kind of misunderstandings from our childhood.
Sure.
I love the opportunity to work with children, and if I can in any way assist them into greater understanding that their parents are doing the best they can and only want what's good for them, even though they might not be taking the route. They might not be taking the route that works best for their child.
Right.
So I love the thought of helping others realize they can go for their heart's desire. And in fact, I think our heart's desire is put there that it's divine inspiration that gives us that thought. Oh, and by the way, I went on and married a Catholic, and we both married for all the wrong reasons, which is why we ended up divorced, I'm sure. And at one point when I was divorced and looking to date and trying to find a husband because I wanted to have one, I realized I don't know how to choose a husband. So I turned it over to God and to my grandmother who had a husband who adored her. And almost immediately after I turned it over to God and my grandmother, on a break in a class, a Jewish man came up to me and said, would you like to do the next process with me? And I was like, wow, this works fast. And we're married now, and my inner child is like, hooray, I have my heart's desire.
Wow. So I'm curious, when you say you turned it over to God and your grandmother, like, what does that look like? What does it mean when you say that?
Well, I guess actually I did it in 2 steps. In one step, I said, okay, God, I give up. I don't do this very well. Help me. And then I was in a counseling trio in psychology class, and I was sharing that I wanted to have a husband, but I wanted one who adored me, not put me ahead of God, but who cherished me like my grandfather cherished my grandmother. And my grandparents were dead, but I sent up a prayer to my grandmother and said, would you help me find one? And after this, my current husband, this Jewish man in my life, came and asked me to do the work, the message came to me intuitively very strongly that I needed to be completely honest with him in a way I hadn't been before with pretty much anybody, even myself. And that he didn't necessarily have to be the one, but that this was a strong possibility. And I've done that since then, made every effort to be honest with him. In fact, one thing I learned was I was terrified to tell him when I spent money. And in the past, I probably would have tried to hide it, but I just bit the bullet and told him straight out how much I spent on whatever. And I noticed that he, who had some concerns about finances, started to relax because he knew that I would always tell him and we would both always know where everything stood. And it just led us to a really solid foundation in that one area that we could count on each other to at least be honest, even if I went and lost $100 bill or something like that. So going for your heart's desire leads to all kinds of benefits. Just recently in the classes that I'm in, I was staying in an inexpensive hotel. It wasn't that nice. And I thought, my heart's desire would be to stay at the Ambrose in Santa Monica. It's a beautiful hotel and they serve you a nice healthy breakfast and the Wi-Fi works and it's lovely. And so I called them up and it was quite a lot of money to stay there. And I believe in going for your heart's desire, but I don't believe in being reckless about it. You need to lean into it, not just like sign up and book the room and then have to pay all the money. But anyway, immediately after that, I was in the classes and the opportunity came to stay at a woman's home who opened her home to people in the classroom, for a very nominal donation. And it had way more benefits in that I could make whatever kind of food I wanted at her home. And I had the added luxury of being able to share the evenings with people who are in the class and become friends and share loving with them. And it's like, wow, this is even better than what I thought was my heart's desire, which often happens in my life. When you go for your heart's desire, I find you get even better. In fact, it's good to ask for what you want and say this or better for the highest good of all concerned.
So I guess how would you help your clients to find their heart's desire?
Some of the times they know it already. And like I'm working with one woman who is a beautiful soul who shared with me what her wildest dreams would look like. And her thought was that she has to go out and get a job to support herself in going for putting together all the things she wants for her heart's desire. But I told her, like Tavia, start doing the thing that's your heart's desire now. You never know. You might not need that job to support you in your efforts. You might find a job that is part of your heart's desire. So I'm a big fan of starting to do whatever you can do within your budget, within your time, within your responsibilities to start making your dreams come true.
Yeah, I can tell that. So you also gave the story earlier from I think it was The Fiddler on the Roof, where the gentleman wanted to read the holy books, spend times reading, like have hours to read the holy books. That was the sweetest thing. And your comment was, well, if you just spent 3 minutes reading the holy books, if that was the sweetest thing to you, that would certainly have some positive effect. So it's, there's this thing where people feel like everything is all or nothing. And yeah. I think it's, it shows up on a lot of areas and, self-help especially, and like dieting is an example, is, people are absolutely terrible at dieting in general. Most people that go on diets, whatever weight they lose, they gain it back and more. So they're actually worse off than if they hadn't did the diet. And one of the things that happens is when you go on a diet, and it's like, I don't care what the diet is, there's going to be times when you're not able to stick to it 100%. And so what people are like, well, they're like, well, I can't stick to this diet, so it's all or nothing. So, where's the chocolate cake? And it's like, well, no, that's not, if you're just eating a healthy meal, like if you were eating three unhealthy meals a day and you find a diet that really works for you and it's, good healthy foods, and you just have replaced one of those meals a day with a healthy meal, you're making a good impact on your life. It's just, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. There could be small steps. And there's this thing, and I'm not sure what it comes from. I don't know if it's maybe a perfection kind of thing. Some people are perfectionists. I don't know where it comes from, but this, the sweetest thing for me would be to read holy books. And so I guess I can't do that though until I'm loaded with money and have hours to spend doing it. It's like, well, no, why, surely you have 3 minutes or, 5 minutes or even, more than that. You don't need millions of dollars to be able to do that, but it's such an obvious answer, but so many people miss that. You know what I mean?
Yes, totally. It seems like small steps in strategic places, that is, small steps going the direction we want, they yield major impact over time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If you say changing one meal a day or whatever small step we can accomplish, at least we're moving in that direction, not going backwards or standing still.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my coaching class, they keep stressing, don't wait until you feel like you're ready. Just start doing it. And I think that is a really big key for me to get me into coaching, because if I waited until I was ready or good enough, then it might have never happened.
Yeah, so I guess with that approach, you've mentioned abundance a few times, and I'm wondering how you work with your clients with abundance, and maybe is there a way to step into abundance, where you can use this approach of it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Maybe you can just introduce an abundance into your life and get that abundance mindset one step at a time.
I appreciate this opportunity to talk about this. When my first husband left me, I quadrupled my income in less than 2 years.
Wow.
And the ways I did it every way I could think of, every way that I could come up with. So it isn't like I took a small step to accomplish it. I took major steps. And I've often wondered what was the most impactful thing I did, and I've decided if a person was going to do only one thing to increase their abundance, to my mind that would be tithing, which is in three religions that I know of at least, giving 10% your income, your net income, to God or to the source of your teachings, whatever that is. So if podcasts were the source of your teachings and the source of your spiritual teachings, in this case that would work, then they tied it to the podcast.
I highly encourage everybody listening to give 10% to your favorite podcaster. Hint, hint.
The way it works usually is you give it to your church, and that's what I do. And I remember one day being in the car. I mean, it's kind of scary to feel like you're not making it on your income, and then to think of giving up 10%. And my mind cannot understand it, but my heart knows. When I did that, I suddenly went from struggling on 100% of my income to I was tithing 10% of my income to my church, and I was tithing 10% of my income to myself in form of a savings kind of thing that was only to be used for going for my heart's desire kind of thing. And giving my share to the government, and then I was living on what was left, and it was more than I needed. I only the wisdom of my heart understands how that happened. And I know a lot of people are hesitant take the risk involved in just turning over 10% of their income to their church or the source of their teachings or their podcast. But I found that I think that's the most powerful thing. I was driving in my car one day and I had been tithing, and at this point there was a bill I had to pay. I don't know what it was. It was gas or electricity or something for our home, something we really needed, or pay my tithe. And I thought I was going over it in my mind, and I thought, well, wait a minute. Who do I want to short in this case? God or an earthly company that I need? And I figured I would rather deal with the earthly company. And so the moment I thought to myself, I'm going to send the money I have into the tithe, instantly two intuitions came to my mind about how to spend the money. How to get more money. Two ways. So here I could get double what I needed. And I firmly believe that those inspirations would not have come because my mind would have been consumed with guilt over not tithing or just my usual money concerns. And I can't stress that enough. I think, and I've heard said that if a person's challenged too much to take the risk of tithing, that if you start with 1%, you'll see results. And I don't know about that. I never tried that.
It's another one of those where it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Wow.
If 10% won't get you started, if you just can't get yourself to do that, try one. And I don't care who you are. I don't care how tight your budget is. You're probably not going to notice 1%. You could do that. That's something you could start with and be okay.
I never looked at it that way. That's exactly it, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting what happens when you do start to give to charities. There's just something in the mind that says, oh, well, I have so much that I can just give some away.
Exactly. I think that too.
Yeah. And the world looks different then. You're looking through the world through a different colored lens at that point.
Yes.
And yeah, there's some magic to it. I mean, there's a lot of people who say, one of the things you should start doing, is to give, because it's just, if nothing else, it changes your mindset, and having that mindset, like this abundance mindset, leads to so many other opportunities that, it's like freeing up your subconscious mind, telling your subconscious mind, hey, I live in a world of abundance, not a world of scarcity. And says, oh, okay, well, if I'm in a world of abundance, then that means there's this whole slew of opportunities that are available. Let me just think about that and serve some up to you. Where if you're telling your subconscious mind, I live in a world of scarcity, it's then like, oh, okay, well, I guess if it's a world of scarcity, then all these wonderful options aren't on the table anymore. We got to go into survival mode and bunker down. And that just flavors your whole world, So it's, yeah, I like that. I like that that's a great place to start with getting an abundance mindset, is to give. I was just saying, it's especially like that you say you encourage your clients to give to podcasters. So my new favorite life coach.
Oh, right. Wow. I never heard it put so eloquently. I actually have been very hesitant to put out the idea of tithing, thinking that I don't know how to explain what happened to people. And that was fantastic. I do think that's exactly how it goes. You're looking at the world through new eyes that aren't coming from poverty consciousness. They're coming from abundance.
Right. Now, we're running out of time, so I'm going to close up here soon, but, parenting is something that's a big concern of mine, something I'm really passionate about, and I've done a lot of shows on parenting in the past. And I know you said you really enjoy working with children. Could you maybe give us like a few minutes and talk about your experience working with children?
Well, let's see. I had the luxury of working with the blessing of working with a young boy recently. He's 9 and he almost died before they correctly diagnosed him with diabetes. And in the meantime, he missed, a year of school, so now he's behind all his classmates and in with other children. And when I worked with him, I asked him what was the best thing that happened to him that day, and I think he said nothing. And then I asked him what was the worst thing that happened, and he related about a boy who teased him and called him diabetes boy, and that he really, really did not like that. And then the thought struck me I've done this process with adults before, and occasionally an adult, when I ask them to tell me the same situation from a third point of view, in the past I've asked, like, if they were a fly on the wall or an object in the area, what would that neutral observation of the situation be? And I've found a few adults who couldn't seem to grasp what I was trying to get from them.
Right.
And so I was struggling. How do I put this to a child? And I asked him, what would your dog say? And he instantly said, ask the boy if he wants to play tomorrow. And thought, wow, I believe that was a big key for him, because feeling like a stranger in a strange land in his new classrooms. And there he could instantly come up with a neutral observation. I love it. I also wish that I could help children to understand the misunderstandings that they sometimes take. Like with the same person, I read a story to them that I wrote for one of my grandchildren. And in the story, well, I don't know if there's enough time left, but...
Oh, go ahead. It's fine.
In the story, it's about a bird who breaks her wing on her first flight. And in the story, the bird's mother, when the bird's ready to leave, they're not in a nest, they're actually on lava rock in Hawaii, and there's a cliff, and the mother keeps pushing the bird toward the cliff, and the bird tries to go left, and the mother won't let her, and the bird tries to go right, and the mother won't let her, and the mother just keeps pushing until all of a sudden the bird's off the edge of the cliff into the air, and unfortunately she goes flat and breaks her wing. And in the story it says, after that the mother never pushed her anymore. And I saw the child visibly relax when I read those words. And I think it's because one of his challenges is coming to grips with different expectations on him. And the story gives a chance for me to say things metaphorically that I can't say straight out, perhaps. And yet the children seem to relate to it so quickly. So I love to use stories. In the end, the bird does discover that when she risks herself to help a baby bird who's about to fall off the cliff before the baby doesn't have wings yet. She just doesn't have feathers yet. I mean, she just is a naked little baby bird about to fall over, and the bird with the broken wing risks herself to push the baby bird back on, and then falls over the cliff again. But this time she flaps her broken wing and her good wing with all her might and kicks her feet too, and ends up flying around in spirals higher and higher, and discovers she can fly even if it's only in spirals. And she looks down, and her mother and the other birds are cheering her. I love that you can say things to children metaphorically and have fun.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. It's a touching story.
And we all can do it, even if we can only fly in spirals, we can still fly.
Beautiful. I can't think of a better way to end the show. So, well, Jeanne, thank you so much for coming on. Before I let you go, if the listeners would like to hear more from you, do you have a website, or if they would like to seek you for counseling?
The best way to reach me would be email. Jeanne Litt, my name, with my French spelling of my name, JeanneLitt @gmail.com. I do have an old inactive blog called Her Plumes Blog on WordPress, but email is the best way to reach me. And I'm on Facebook with my name.
Okay, great. I'll make sure to link those in the show notes for the listeners.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. All right, take care, Jeanne.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that. Excellent stuff. I actually had a session with Jeanne, a coaching session, and I can vouch for her skills. She was quite excellent in one session. She was able to help me with an issue to resolve it, and we got some really good work done. So she's quite good. She's quite skilled. So if you're in the market for a life coach, I could recommend Jeanne to you. So check it out. I've got her email and her Facebook page linked in the show notes. I'm sure she'd be able to help you. All right, if you would like to help the show out, the best way to do that is to go to patreon.com/choiceconversations and become a contributor. There's a link to that in the show notes. I would really appreciate that. All right. Have a great day. Or not. The choice is yours.